Welcome to Free Media. I'm Robbie Suave.
And I'm Amber Duke.
Well, before we jump into today's show, please be sure to subscribe to our new YouTube channel, which is linked below. And now we will, in fact, dive in. New White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt announced in her first press briefing that they are opening up White House credentials and briefing room space to independent media, podcasts, and other new media. Praise be to God. Let's watch.
This White House believes strongly in the First Amendment, so it's why our team will work diligently to restore the press passes of the 440 journalists whose passes were wrongly revoked by the previous administration. We're also opening up this briefing room to new media voices who produce news-related content and whose outlet is not already represented by one of the seats in this room. We welcome independent journalists, podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators to apply for credentials to cover this White House. And you can apply now on our new website, whitehouse.gov/new media.
So I think this is great news. You probably do as well. There's so much news and good journalism being done by independent people on new media platforms. You know, we talk a lot about how we are just in a totally different news environment, and, you know, the idea that you just have a couple networks or a couple mainstream papers, you know, asking the tough questions and doing those interviews, and that's all the news is, that's just totally over.
Exactly. And the WHCA controls who gets seats in the briefing rooms, but they do not control who gets a White House hard pass. That is at the discretion of the administration. The previous administration decided to deny a whole bunch of people, from One America News to Turning Point USA's Associated Media outlet Frontlines, and a few other, Right Side Broadcasting, I believe, was caught up in that dragnet. And you might have criticisms of those outlets for being maybe too conservative or too open about their views, but the idea that they're any different from the CNNs or Washington Posts of the world is obviously based on a false premise. And I thought it was interesting that Karoline Leavitt in the press briefing today decided to actually give two of the seats that were typically reserved for staff of the White House communications team to two of these so-called new media outlets, one of which was Axios, which is kind of questionable, but the other one was Breitbart, because of the WHCA's control of the briefing room seats. Short of actually seizing control of the WHCA and forcing them to redo the seating chart, that's the only way that those people are able to be actually sat down in the briefing room, as opposed to jostling for space in the aisles. So I thought that showed a real commitment to bringing in new voices that are more committed to asking questions that the American people care about, or outlets that are more widely read by the American people than some of these legacy outlets.
Right, we've talked about it so many times, but, you know, millions and millions of people watching the Trump interview with Joe Rogan, for instance. Millions and millions of people getting their news through podcasts, through these kinds of long-form interviews with important people. That is a part of the new system for how you get information. It's not just, oh, I'll turn on CNN and see what they said about it today. Now, there will always be a room, there should be room, in my view, for the kinds of more traditional semi-adversarial or hostile questions that you get from mainstream people. We'll talk about Jim Acosta in a subsequent segment, so we'll save that for later. But I think that has a role, and I certainly don't want to see the White House press secretary turn the briefing room into just like all friendly media or something like that. But there are a lot of good adversarial media organizations too that are not, you know, in the traditional mode or even asking the right questions. I mean, if you'd had a more adversarial, even from a left bent or progressive bent, you might have gotten better questions about, for instance, Joe Biden's cognitive decline, age-related decline, whereas the mainstream media, for whatever reason, you could say just they were just bad at their jobs or they were complicit in it, totally dropped the ball, at least in the cable news department. The Wall Street Journal did good reporting, but totally dropped the ball on asking tough questions of Karine Jean-Pierre about that, even when it was becoming obvious.
And if you watch the press briefing today, you will see a familiar theme from the past Trump administration, which is that pretty much every mainstream media reporter asked a question about the same topic, just in different variations, right?
That's always a huge problem.
And that's why it's so important for these independent or even conservative outlets to be in the briefing room, because they are asking questions from a fundamentally different lens and asking questions that are typically not covered by the mainstream media. I mean, I think pretty much every question from the top 10 outlets that you, as you might call them, in the briefing room today was about Trump putting a pause on foreign aid, which I think we're going to talk about later in the show. But they all were framing asking their questions about how horrible this is going to be for the American people, and no one thought to go in there and ask it from a different perspective. And that is a fundamental failing of the press and the way that the briefing room has operated up until now.
Yeah, that really is a problem, the same question getting asked over and over again. I even noticed that years back, I testified before the House Civil Rights Committee about how hate crimes were being categorized, hate groups, that kind of thing. I was brought on by the conservative side to kind of contextualize some of the fear-mongering about the extent of right-wing domestic terrorism in the country. And, all of the squad members are on this committee, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, et cetera. And what you had is, and I know this was, my experience is not unique in this regard at all, is the same question get asked over and over again, because each member of Congress wanted, and I'm sure the Republicans do this too, they wanted, video of them putting this tough question to the witness so there's that media clip of them. And the cable media, mainstream media figures have the exact same incentive in the briefing room that, well, I want video of me asking it. And I see why that's your incentive, but that's not a great incentive from the standpoint of the public being more widely informed and getting a wider range of subjects addressed by the government.
Yeah, and I think it was pretty clear today that Caroline Leavitt does not intend to only ask or only get questions from friendly media or not.
No, she
called on all
absolutely.
the mainstream media outlets. And she also, after she called on Axios and Breitbart in those two sort of select seats today, she did what is the traditional thing, which is the first question goes out to the Associated Press. So right after Matt Boyle and Mike Allen, she went to Zeke Miller, who asked a predictably stupid question about, do you commit to telling the truth from the podium, which seemingly was never a problem with the past administration. But clearly she intends on still keeping some semblance of the old ways while also opening up the process to new people.
My favorite question she got was about a favorite subject of ours and everyone else's, the mysterious flying objects over New Jersey.
She actually talked about that at the top of the briefing even before the questions came.
Right, she confirmed that it was in fact the FAA, which is as predicted.
Shocking.
Of course, if the government was not freaked out about it, that probably means it's government stuff. But I love that it was described as, it's FAA, so it was friendly. Friendly. Do we consider that friendly? I don't know. All right, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to tune in tomorrow on our new YouTube channel, which is linked below. That's Reason Free Media on YouTube. More content coming soon. Thanks so much.